So my previous end of year video reviewing every hit rap song of the year in one sentence was a shorter, faster way of covering that topic. And now for my end of year video on rap albums, I'm doing the exact opposite and making a video that might end up being so long that I'm probably going to question why I'm making it this way, at least 20 times throughout the process. Every new rap album I listened to in 2021 tier list, with the tiers being S, the best of 2021, A, great albums, B, good albums, C, not so great albums, and D, the worst of 2021. Oh my god, bro, this chair. I'm gonna try and move as little as possible during this. And all of this is just completely my opinion based on what I wanted and expected from each artist and what I ended up getting from the album. So let's just dive into it, going by the chronological order that the albums were released in. This is CDTVProductions. Thank you for all the support you guys have been showing the channel lately. And let's take a look at the best and worst rap albums of 2021.
Riding with my brother to the end, that's for sure. If you got a problem, nigga, please let me know.
Lil Skies, Unbothered, I'm putting that in the C tier. I can't fault Skies for trying a few different sounds throughout the project, but it did make it pretty hit or miss for me. The tracks I found myself being the most fond of were the ones that gave me that vintage Skies vibe, like Dead Broken on Sight. Having My Way, Riot, and Deep Think Don't Sink also worked pretty well for me. It's just that the other 9 songs on the album didn't connect with me as much as Skies' older music did.
I'm from where real young, you make killers as mates. It's maximum profit on minimum wage.
This one, I'm going with the A tier. Now I'll admit, this is one of the albums that I listened to the most recently this year. Like, I listened to this album in December, so there might be a little bit of kind of recency bias here, but I do think it fits really nicely into the A tier. Look at me, bro, warming up to UK rap more and more every year. I thought this was a really well balanced album, and being the first one that I've ever heard from Fredo, I feel like I got to know a lot about him through this project. If you want to give it a chance, just listen to the first song on the album, Biggest Mistake, and see if it just hooks you into the project like it did for me. The highlight for me was definitely the last 3 tracks though, with Fredo taking a really personal approach on those ones. Also, you've got a really good Pop Smoke feature on this album too, so at the very least, check it out for that. Great album start to finish.
Hey, long road, tumble down this black hole, stuck in Sunday league, but I'm on levels with Ronaldo.
Here we go, guys, are you ready? TYRON by Slowthai. Worst of 2021. I'm joking. This is in the best of 2021 tier for me. TYRON is the first full project that I've heard from Slowthai, and I'm definitely a fan now. As you can tell just by looking at the track list, it's a project that's divided into 2 halves, and the idea of that is to show that we all have more than just one side to us as a person, with the first 6 tracks being loud, in-your-face, banger type of songs that are stylized in all caps, which Slowthai does really well on here, by the way. And then Play With Fire sort of acts as a bridge into the second half of the lowercase titled tracks, which are more thoughtful and introspective. And as much as I love 45 Smoke, Cancelled, and Maza, that is my favorite section of the album right there, the second half. And NHS, I listened to that at a point in the year where I was really struggling with a few things, and that song's theme of not putting too much emphasis on the bad days and not getting yourself too down about them because bad always comes with the good, it honestly did bring a little bit of a tear to my eye and affected my perspective on things since I heard it a little bit. I love this.
Like a damn rock duster. After dark, the riot starts way uglier than Bubba Sparks.
Unlocked 1.5, we're going with the A tier for this. Great album in my opinion. To me personally, it's pretty much neck and neck with the original. Sure, it takes a different approach with the sound, but I really appreciated the more sort of outer space, sci-fi sound that it has to it. All the features were great, and a Denzel Curry and Benny the Butcher collab. Give me more, please. As I've said before, the only track that I'm not crazy about on this one is the Jay Versace remix of Layup, but overall, I really like this one a lot.
You're brooding all alone, I've been weighing all your
Okay, we're on a little bit of a roll here because I'm putting this one in the S tier. I'm sure a lot of you watching this video haven't heard this, and you need to go and change that as soon as possible. Smiling with No Teeth is an easy S and one of the most creative projects that I've heard the entire year. The concept of the album is easy enough to follow, and it is presented in a really cool way, with the idea of it basically being that there's two symbolic black dogs in Genesis Owusu's life. One of them is depression. That's pretty common symbolism for depression, which is covered in the first half of the tracks, and the other black dog is racism, which is covered in most of the second half songs in the project, before going into a few songs at the end that cover both of the black dogs. And the way that Genesis presents these subjects is so great. Like, you've got songs like Centerfold and Waiting on You, which have such a pretty smooth sound to them. They almost seem glamorous. But then you look at the lyrics and they're from the perspective of the first black dog, depression, having an all-consuming toxic relationship with Genesis. The whole thing plays out like a movie, honestly, with these narratives evolving in a pretty clear way as the project goes on, and I just think it's fucking brilliant. There is such a huge variety of sounds on this album that it can't even really fully be classified as a rap album, but I just included it here because I really wanted to talk about this album and I really wanted to share it with you guys. I can't recommend this enough. This album deserves all the love that it can possibly get.
My heroes in federal sweatsuits and New Balances. What's the outcome for niggas like me?
The Butcher Coming Neighbor, that's an A. I don't think I can ever get tired of listening to Benny the Butcher. And when you pair him with Harry Fraud's soulful sample-based production that ranges between a hard-hitting, haunting, and luxurious throughout the 9 tracks on here, it's lovely. If you ask me, this is a worthy successor to the plugs I met. My only real issue with this project is that on some tracks, Benny's voice sounds a little bit too quiet compared to the instrumental, and his voice doesn't sound super clear like it usually does. But apart from that, I don't really have any other complaints.
I just had to get this out my system.
Good old Nate. NF. We're going with the B tier, the first B tier. So I know that this is the year that I made my Why I Don't Like NF's Music video, but even as a non-fan, Clouds is still a pretty solid project. I still stand by what I said in that video, but this was not bad at all. It probably partly is because this is a slightly different project to anything that I've heard from NF before, with it having a little bit less of a melodramatic and overly dark sound. I mean, even the cover of this mixtape is a little bit lighter than the color palette of his albums. Just Like You, Lost with Hobson, Layers, these are all pretty nice tracks in my opinion. And even songs such as Clouds and That's a Joke are pretty solid as well. I think this turned out alright.
Would that make you happy? Don't feel like I'm doing too much.
Would that make you happy? They used to hate when I was down. They never thought that I would blow up and get them racks. When this project started, I was actually surprised that it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Still, Family was actually a really great, heartfelt song, and the following 2 tracks on the album, they bumped hard enough. And then it just went downhill. And downhill further. And then we hit Make-A-Wish, and the album just nosedived off of the small peak that it was on. Streets, Woo Wham, and Soul Train is one of the most confusingly horrible 3-track runs that I've ever heard on an album. The project started off better than I thought, but by the end of it, it just derailed into really offbeat rapping and extremely questionable singing, and it was definitely one of the worst things I heard this year.
Let's be honest, I really had a long day, okay?
You guys already know, this is the S tier for me. I put a review on this out shortly after it dropped, so you can check that video out if you want my full initial thoughts on it, but basically, I think this is Quadeca's best album yet. Almost every song is entirely self-produced, which is super impressive considering the layers and the progression that a lot of the instrumentals have on here. There's a strong storytelling concept throughout, using the metaphor of mountains and mountain climbing to represent different emotional states and personal growth following a breakup. And vocally, it's Quadeca's strongest work too. This album really struck a chord with me, and it's one of my favorites of the year.
He was barely pushing down. My whole family cursed. Now get the fuck on my ride.
Ooh, where's he gonna put the Brockhampton album? Where is he gonna put it? It's an A. It's an A for me. Man, there are so many great songs on Roadrunner, but the first ones that come into my mind every time I think of it are The Light and The Light Part 2. Kevin Abstract and Joba pull out amazing verses for these songs, with Joba sort of journaling his thoughts and his feelings following the suicide of his father, which happened between the last Brockhampton album and this one. I'll be honest, that verse made me cry. The lyrics were just so honest and it hit me right in the heart. Kevin on Buzzcut was another one of my favorite verses on the album. That one is crazy. Everybody on Window, that track is ridiculous. Like every Brockhampton album for me, with the exception of Saturation 2, it did take a few listens for it to really click with me. But when it did, I definitely appreciated what each member of the group had to offer on here.
She think I wanna taste the pussy, I ain't tasting shit like a COVID symptom.
You already know, it's my favorite Griselda member, Mr. Incapable of Making a Bad Album, Conway the Machine. The bars on the intro track alone, Bruiser Brody, had me just scrunching up my face so often. On 6:30 Tip-Off, he says, "They say West is the brains behind it and Benny is the star, but let's not act like a machine ain't the silliest with the bars." And that is a sentiment I couldn't agree with more. Start to finish, this project is hard as hell. Here we go. I'm interested to see how this one is taken. D tier for this. I have listened to this album the full way through once. No matter how hard I try, I can't bring myself to listen to the full thing again. I have heard so much shit like this from Thug and Gunna and the YSL clique before. It was just really boring, uninspired, filled with production that wasn't new or interesting in any way, and nothing stood out. Even with a bunch of big name mainstream artists as features, there's almost zero songs on this project that I'm gonna revisit in the future. My expectations for this were already low because it's a compilation album with Young Thug and a bunch of other people that sound like him but not as good. So I wasn't really disappointed, it was just completely average and lacking anything special.
Lately I've been thinking about putting my dick inside Caliushis.
Well, we might as well continue it while we've got the D tier rolling. You know what I've never thought to myself before? Man, it would be sick if Yachty made an album where he is even more offbeat. I know the offbeat rapping is an intentional choice for this project to pay homage to certain Michigan artists and their off-kilter cadences, but to me it results in a super awkward listen. It might just be me, but I feel like rappers tend to rap on beat because it sounds good. Jokes aside, respect to Yachty for trying something different, but it just didn't really connect with me. Also, how many baby rappers do we have now? This is getting out of hand. I mean, this mixtape features Baby Smooth, Sada Baby, Babyface Ray, and Babytron. What is going on?
Yeah. Too much money to count, what's the amount? 10 of a bounce, I gotta pay a nigga to add it up.
Okay, so when I first listened to this album, I had it in the B tier. I listened to it one time, got caught up with listening to music for other videos, and didn't revisit it for a long time until recently. And when I re-listened, it just hit even more, and I bumped it up to an A. Then I listened again, and bumped it up to an S. The off-season has Cole sounding the hungriest he's sounded in such a long time. The crazy thing is, I don't even love all the beats on this project. On 95 South, Punchin' the Clock, and Let Go My Hand, I'm not super crazy about the beats on those songs, but Cole makes me not care about that with how brilliant his rapping over them is. And that's not to say I don't love any of them. For example, Pride is the Devil has a super catchy instrumental that either samples or uses the same sample as I Can't Decide by Amine, and Cole and Baby work beautifully with that, and Amari and My Life are also fantastic in this aspect too. I know the off-season is presented as a sort of prelude to the fall off, but I think it stands on its own as an album just fine, and it's probably my favorite Cole project since 2014 Forest Hills Drive.
You still tricking niggas out they cash when you out here?
Okay, so I hadn't listened to a Young Nudy album before Dr. Evil. Turns out I don't like Young Nudy. The two songs I fully enjoyed here were Two-Face with G Herbo and Dr. Evil. Pretty great beat selection throughout, but I really don't enjoy Nudy as a rapper. Voice of the Heroes, It's going in the B tier. Now this one, a B tier is actually really good for this album. If you've watched any videos where I've talked about them before, you'll know that I think Durk and Baby are okay overall, but there's nothing that they offer in their own music that I find to be all that interesting. But here, something just seemed to click with them working together. And it feels like that helped keep things a bit more interesting because there was always two rappers on each song and neither one of them had to carry it by themselves. The fact that I find so many of the tracks on here enjoyable is really nice, to be honest. It does have its issues. I must have mentioned the mixing on some of the tracks being pretty poor so many times now. But overall, I think both Baby and Durk were fairly in form on The Voice of the Heroes. I didn't love it, and it's definitely got too many tracks for me, but I think B is a very solid position for it.
Dirt in my stick and my wood clean. It's a Blue Benjamin's vaccine.
Another one that might be a little bit contentious, I'm not too sure, but I'm going with C. C for Culture. Culture 3 is one of those instances where the music isn't awful, but I'm just so sick of hearing Migos as a group at this point, and I think they definitely peaked with Culture 1. They oversaturated their sound over the years, and the law of diminishing returns is kicking in heavy. I pretty much have zero desire to come back to Culture 3 at all. That's what I have to say about that one. Hall of Fame, gonna go with the B tier on this one. So with Polo G, his lack of changing things up all that much does mean that I am starting to cool off on his sound more and more with every album that comes out, but Hall of Fame still has enough good tracks for me to enjoy it. Boom is an amazing track first of all. I would love to hear more of that type of energy from Polo. No Return is another highlight. Clueless is absolutely wild. There's a bunch of highlights throughout this project. Although, For the Love of New York, that track should have never seen the light of day. So yeah, Hall of Fame isn't mind-blowing, not crazy about it, but I think it is good enough for the B tier.
They sleep on me, I'm Freddy Krueger in some Gucci frame.
Okay, I dropped a review for this one. It will be linked down in the description, and you can check that out to see why I've put this in the D tier. Marilyn's Staff is still great though.
Take my nephews out to the knees. They like, who? I'm like, wait.
Let me just drag that on up there. So I absolutely loved Igor, and it was one of my favorite albums to come out in the year that it did, but thank you Westside Gunn for inspiring Tyler to make a full-on rap album again. Tyler's newest albums always contain influences from his older projects, so you can still hear a bit of Igor in here, specifically on tracks like What's Your Name and especially Sweet, but for the most part, Call Me If You Get Lost is definitely a more rap-centric effort. Oh, and Manifesto. I can't be the only one that was reminded of Tyler's Rusty verse from the Wolf album with his third verse on there. Also, I'll admit that I didn't like the DJ drama ad-libbing over the songs on my first few listens to the album. I did find it to be annoying, but now, after so many listens, it just seems like such an iconic part of the album, and I love it. There's just so many cool moments on here, and once again, Tyler puts on a masterclass on how to fill your album with personality, color, and vibrance. S tier, one of my favorite albums of the year.
We gon' be art when I used to shoot my shot, you a matrix.
I'm a huge IDK fan, but You See For Yourself is my least favorite out of the three projects that I've heard from so far, so I'm putting this in the B tier for now. It is alright, but I think it's undeniably messier than I Was Very Bad and Is He Real. To me, it feels less focused than those, and there were definitely more tracks on this one that just didn't click with me. That's not to say it doesn't have its highlights and revealing moments, for example, Hey Auntie in 1995. Those are really deep tracks that describe how IDK's childhood experiences affected how he is as a person now and how he interacts with other people. And a big theme of the album seems to be about love and how it can affect a lot of things about you if you didn't get enough of it growing up. And I also do want to say I very much appreciate IDK putting his story out there like this to help others who are in a similar situation or who have been through similar things. The content is there on a few tracks, but I think it's really the sound of them that left a lot to be desired for me. It seems the most mainstream and almost pop rappy out of every album he's made, if that makes sense. Like, it's leaning too much into trends, and that takes away from this album for me. Maybe it'll grow on me over time, because I didn't love Is He Real at first either, and now I listen to that album all the time. But at the moment, You See For Yourself was good, but not as engaging as I was hoping it would be.
You will never catch me slipping out in traffic.
Vince Staples were going with another B on this one. This self-titled LP was a cool little project. My twin did a reaction to this one. Once again, you can check that out down in the description below, but I thought it was really cool to see a more reflective and toned down version of Vince on this project, which is something that you don't usually see on his other albums. A nice little 10-track package of songs.
I stay focused on my trip, I'm flying, you stay flying.
Holy shit, what is this? The B movie? I know people will probably roast the fact that this is in an equal tier or even above some albums from more established rappers. But once again, I'm not really ranking these albums against each other. They're just in their own tiers based on what I expected from them versus what I got. And this was a little bit better than expected. On All Over the Place, KSI is pretty much nailed making pretty straightforward UK bangers and radio tracks. The fact that there was a less noticeable gap between KSI and the features on the album here than there was on his last album, Dissimulation, shows that he's moving in the right direction and honing his craft a little bit. At the very least, I think it's an impressive little lane that he's carved out for himself, and I respect it. It really hurts to do this, but this is a D tier album for me. And the worst part about it is the responsibility for that does not lie with Pop Smoke, because he wasn't here to finish the album. Hell, he wasn't even here to put this album together. And it's basically a label product that comes across as unfinished, messy, and really strange. I love Pop Smoke as an artist, but due to this being the second album that has been released after his passing, it entirely lacks the soul of his other music. This is evident from the weird production choices, Looking at You, Top Shotta, the inconsistent flip-flopping sound of the project, and the fact that it just entirely lacks the feeling of a Pop Smoke album. It's a really eerie listen, honestly, because listening to this album just reminds me that Pop Smoke isn't here to craft another amazing album and just really fulfill the enormous potential that he had.
Have you ever seen a nightmare brought to life? Where I'm from, you get chefed on a normal night.
And UK rap takes another W. But I would expect nothing less from my favorite UK rapper to this day, Dave. Sure, the name makes him sound like a bloke you meet up with at the pub on Saturday night for a few drinks, but his music undeniably has the depth that his name might not make clear just from looking at it. Once again, my twin reacted to this one, so I won't bang on about it too much, but it is amazing from start to finish. And In the Fire is still one of the most insane posse cut tracks that I have ever heard. There's not many other people out there that can work a pen like this man. If you want to hear some super thought-provoking stuff, along with a handful of UK bangers, then this is the album for it. And let me just drop that in there. Logic officially came out of retirement to drop this. It's another one my twin reacted to, but man, this was so disappointing to listen to after Under Pressure was just like the perfect curtain close for Logic's career. I know the Bobby Tarantino tapes are supposed to be more fun and carefree, but they're not supposed to be lackluster. And that's what this one was. It's not necessarily horrible by any means, just disappointing and lacking any sort of punch to it. The flimsy, thrown together nature of it, following Logic's best album in years, makes it one of my least favorite releases this entire year.
With the gang, I'm a rebel. I make treaties with the devil.
Trip at Night has to be my favorite Trippie Redd project in a while. The rage beat formula definitely does start to get repetitive by the time you reach the end of the 18 tracks on the album, which stops it from going up to an A. But for the most part, I think it's a sound that actually complements Trippie Redd's vocal style pretty damn well. If you haven't listened and want to see if this one's for you, I'd recommend checking out Molly Hearts, Betrayal, Supernatural, Matt Hardy 999, and Baki.
Walked in the bank, bitch caught me handsome.
Okay, so I don't know if this is a controversial opinion, and I don't really care if it is or not because it's just my honest opinion, but side A of this project is not that great to me. We'll talk about side B after this, but honestly, I felt kind of bored by the time I reached the end of side A, and there's only 13 songs on it. It has a few highlights sprinkled throughout. For example, Bash Money is wild, hearing Wayne over production that dark and boom bappy is amazing, and Spoons because Westside and Conway is always a great combo, but it is far from my favourite Westside Gunn project. Still, it's better than Fly God is an Awesome God 2, so it's not the worst thing I've ever heard from him either. But side B is a nice B. First of all, some of the features on here are definitely more up my alley than the side A ones, with 2 Chainz, Tyler the Creator, and Armani Caesar showing up with great verses on their respective tracks. And the production on this one stands out to me as better too. I love the energy Gunn came through with on Julia Lang. Hell on Earth Part 2 is absolutely ridiculous. Forest Lawn, magnificent. Way more highlights I remember here than side A. Survivor Series 95 is one that stood out to me as an absolute drag to get through. I just really wasn't feeling the Jay Worthy or Larry June verses on there, and the production, didn't like the beat on it. But as a whole, this one was a lot less boring to me, and definitely more enjoyable.
I'm in New York where it be cold. Look at my neck cause it's iced out.
And once again, it's time to expand the beat here. Virgo World by Lil Tecca was an album that completely passed me by, in the sense that I listened to it once or twice and never felt the need to go back again because it felt super monotonous, and this is coming from someone that really enjoyed watching Tecca's come up. But We Love You Tecca 2 brings it back a bit with some more entertaining and melodic bangers that actually have more replay value to them. I can't say I have too much to say about it, but the music on here is enjoyable for casual listening, decent stuff.
I'm free.
Donda. You guys already know this is some top tier stuff for me. Check out my twins' 2-part reaction to this project and you'll see why we love it so much. I'm surprised that it's a bit of a divisive album, honestly. I think it's the perfect type of project for where Kanye is in his career right now. A huge bulk of it is handled by the features, but I think Kanye selected them really well and crafted something special out of it. It's one of the few albums that can be stacked with 27 songs and have me remembering what each and every one of them sound like with ease. Sure, you could say it's a bit messy and bloated, but that's not an issue for me personally with this album when I love like 90% of the songs on here. While the features put in some of the best verses on the album, Kanye still has his high points too, like his verse on Off the Grid, his part on Jesus Lord, the beautiful songs that are Lord I Need You and Come to Life. I could talk about this album forever, but there's still quite a few albums we have left to get through, so let me leave it at this. To me personally, this is the best Kanye album in at least the last 5 years, and possibly even more.
Yeah, say that you a lesbian, girl, me too. Hey, girls want girls where I'm from, hey.
Okay, if you watched my end of year video on hit rap songs this year, then I'm pretty sure you guys already know where this is going. I'm not the biggest Drake fan overall, it's no secret, but even then, I still think he's capable of making a great album. If you're reading this, it's too late and Nothing Was the Same exists. Hell, I even think More Life is pretty damn solid. But this album has next to no replay value. Even the choruses, which is usually a strong point of Drake's music in terms of making them catchy, are weak as hell and not memorable on here. I've listened to this album from front to back at least 4 times, and looking at the names of the songs, I couldn't even recite 5 of the hooks to you from memory. The content is extremely uninspired, and I think the biggest sin is that the album is nowhere near as fun and silly as the title of it in the album cover would imply. If Drake was just messing around on this album and playing up to his corny Loverboy side in a self-aware way, I think that would have actually made for a really entertaining album. But instead he goes this route where he's playing it 100% straight-faced and serious, and it bores me to fucking tears. You would literally have to pay me money to listen to this full album again. I'm not joking. I will never listen to this again start to finish unless you hand me actual money to do it, or if it's for a video that I'm getting paid for.
That's career suicide, though I should have been a friend when your grandma died.
Okay, now let's counter that with some overwhelming positivity for a phenomenal album. This is the first full album that I've ever listened to from Sims, and I feel like it's an amazing introduction to her as an artist and person. And once again, look at this UK love. That's like 4 UK albums in the top 2 tiers. So many incredible tracks just stacked throughout this with really personal and interestingly delivered content. Introvert is a 6-minute epic piece of music that is so fantastically produced and rapped. Woman is smooth as hell. Two Worlds Apart's flow has been stuck in my head since I heard the damn song. Bougie, 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 bougie. I Love You, I Hate You uses the sample that's woven into the beat in such a cool way. I See You is really relaxing, vulnerable, and sweet. And that's just a small handful of highlights that this project is filled to the brim with. It does have moments that hit you emotionally, but for the most part, it just makes me feel extremely relaxed and positive. The best way I can put it is this music makes my soul glow. It's pretty fucking perfect. Please listen to it if you haven't already.
My mama mad at me, I know I fucked up big. My girl mad at me, I know I fucked up big.
The Melodic Blue was a good album. It didn't necessarily bridge the gap into being great, in my opinion, but I think this is a solid album that's leading to Baby Keem making an incredible album in the future. Because there's a lot of elements of a brilliant album here. We see a more personal side of Keem that has mostly been hidden up to this point with songs like Issues, Scars, and 16, all of which were really well done, by the way. Which is also mixed with some of his hardest hitting bangers ever, like Trademark USA, Family Ties, and Range Brothers. Up until the awful final segment. And there was an effort to lace more of a concept throughout this one. I just think if Keem improves on and fine-tunes those elements for his next album, then it's gonna be even more amazing. But on its own, the Melodic Blue is definitely something that I enjoyed. Okay, now, this might be the hardest album to boil down to a letter for this tier list. I think it's a B for me. Maybe. This album is so experimental that the first time I listened to it, my Bluetooth headphones cut out while I was listening to it, and for a good 10 seconds, I thought that the abrupt jump into complete silence was actually a part of the music. There's so much going on here, the music is so chaotic and different that it's genuinely gonna take a few more months from now for me to really figure out how I feel about it. But it's a B for the time being, because I really do like what Richie with a T did with his rapping on here, and the production from Parker Corey was nothing if not ambitious. Apparently while making this album, Steppa J. Groggs, who was one of the 3 members of Injury Reserve before he passed away in 2020, insisted that they just, and I quote, make some weird shit with this album. And it's good to see that Richie with a T and Parker Corey followed through with that. Also, Top Picks for You might just be the most existentially depressing song that I've ever heard, but I'd say that's a positive mark for the album because it seems like that's what it was going for.
I gave it a D and she fell out. Put some ice on her finger, she chilled out. You rapping that shit that you ain't about.
Okay, now you might be saying, whoa, 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 CDTV. D tier? Wayne had good performances on this project. And he did. Some of them were really good. But let me put it like this. Imagine you've got a chocolate bar made of 10 blocks in front of you. You want to eat every block and experience the full bar. One half of each piece is some rich, smooth, lovely Lindor chocolate, okay? And the other half of each piece, cow shit. Would you really finish all 10 pieces and say, well, it's not the worst chocolate bar I've ever had, as if the cow shit didn't taint the whole experience? Maybe I'm being really mean to Rich the Kid with that metaphor, but he's rich enough to not care, and maybe if he rapped better I wouldn't have made that horrendous analogy. D tier.
I ain't have to ask her, know exactly where you be.
I'll be honest, I don't really understand the appeal of Don Toliver. To me, it feels like Travis Scott's music with the most interesting parts removed. It took me 2 separate listens to finish this album. Like, I've never listened to it the whole way through. Because if you don't really like Don Toliver's sound, it's a drag to get through. But the music on it isn't downright awful like most of the stuff in the D tier, so that's why I'm putting Life of a Don at a C. Turns out I didn't really like Don Toliver's Load.
Go and get my belt, I'ma beat you like your dad.
Yeah.
Okay, now this might sound harsh, and he might prove what I'm about to say wrong in the future, but I don't think Zack Fox was ever meant to make more than one rap song. Jesus Is the One worked because you had the context of this guy who is not a rapper coming on Kenny Beats' show and just dropping this really weird ass freestyle that's so absurd and ridiculous, and that's a big part of what makes it enjoyable. And in a weird way, it also bumps that Kenny Beats production goes hard. Whereas on this project, all of that kind of disappears. He kind of dials back the comedy, like it's not as overt and in your face as Jesus Is the One was, and every line that does have humor in it reads like a Twitter joke, but then his delivery and the way that he raps sounds like slightly more serious on this project, so there's just this weird disconnect between Zack Fox wanting to make music that's a bit more professional but still trying to put a little bit of humor into it. It doesn't mix well. Mind Your Business and Get Off My Dick were fun listens, but outside of those, I'm coming back to nothing else on here.
Why you fuck my friend, is you stupid? Hurt you when they caught the beans, is you stupid?
With Punk by Young Thug, we're gonna expand the B tier a little bit more again. I was honestly a bit worried before going into my first listen of Punk. Just knowing that the album was gonna be a bit slower sonically, and the fact that I didn't like Bubbly, the biggest single from it, had me a little bit apprehensive and worried that I wasn't gonna like it. But it was actually a fairly nice listen. We got to see a bit more depth from Young Thug on here, which was really nice. I always knew I wasn't gonna be gay. And it manages to stay fairly unpredictable and creative throughout. Rich Neighbor Shit and Icy Hot are pretty terrible, and there's a few other tracks on here that I could definitely do without, but this is an enjoyable album to just lie down, relax, and listen to, and then get hyped as fuck when Scoliosis comes on, before going back to relaxing and lying down while listening again, and really getting absorbed into the interesting mind of Young Thug.
Why would I pray for your health? Maybe I'll pray for myself.
JPEG Mafia LP, it's going in the A tier. Every single time I listen to LP, a new track from it that I either didn't like or just thought was okay before grows on me. I haven't even listened to the offline version yet, which is probably a criminal offense, and I'm still putting it in the A tier. I don't care if Thoughts Prayer has that really awkward, sampleless break in the song, the rest of it still sounds great. I just love the fact that this sounds like nothing else that I've heard this year, and if you check out one song from this project, if you're a little bit intrigued now, listen to Rebound. That song sets off my fight or flight response in the best way with how intense and hyped up it is. JPEG Mafia was in peak form here, and I'd go as far to say that it's the best album that I've heard from him.
He not really stepping, he just rapping and he talk tough. Had a Smith and Weston, bought a Glock, then an XD.
Comethazine, the album, is not perfect, but after an album that was as weak as Pandemic, it was a pleasant surprise to hear something that was a bit better from him. It has nowhere near as many low energy, dull instrumentals on it as that one did, and is pretty much exactly what I want and expect from Comethazine, so yeah, B tier for this one.
I'm a hot girl, I don't do titles. If I do date, it'll be Michael. Keeps you spicy.
This wasn't even a proper studio album. It was more of a sort of compilation album that had Megan's freestyles that were uploaded to YouTube and some unreleased tracks, but I honestly thought it turned out better than her album, Good News. By quite a lot. I didn't like Good News, but this is what I want to hear more of from Megan. The freestyles in particular go hard as hell. If you listen to the freestyles on this album and you say that Megan doesn't have a great flow, I want some of the crack you are smoking, my friend. Yes, a lot of the tracks are about sex, but that's what I expect from Megan, and I don't see why people always bring that up as a negative against her. And she does it really well. While the project is definitely too long for what it is, I thought most of it was an entertaining listen.
I don't really care. I make trends and forget about them.
Okay, the fact that this is not going in the D tier might not seem like the biggest compliment ever, and it is probably not, but this album was a lot better than I expected it to be. Sure, at least half of the album I could completely do without, that's why it's not any higher than a C, but there is some legitimately good songs on here. Most of the good ones are great because of the production and the features, as is to be expected, but on songs like Stuck in the Jungle and Touch the Sky, I do genuinely think French holds his own on those songs, and actually helps keep them good. So while it's not really a great album, and it definitely hasn't changed my mind about French overall, it's not one of the worst of the year in my opinion.
And punching my liver, if I let it kill me, my mama will never forgive me. And I'm in my feelings
Now, this last one, Fighting Demons by Juice WRLD, this is the only one on this list that I really don't know where to rank it. I'm giving this one an NA ranking because I just have so many conflicting thoughts on it that I really can't fit it into any one of these tiers. First of all, as mentioned earlier, a second posthumous album is almost always a bad idea. It's completely devoid of input from the artist other than the songs that they made and didn't put out. That's kind of the issue here. This one really does feel like someone else's vision for what a Juice WRLD album should be. I get that the message this was trying to put across was about the dangers of addiction, to possibly help other people in similar circumstances, and they tried to sort of make a concept out of it throughout the album. But for me personally, it's extremely uncomfortable to hear Juice rapping, in some cases gleefully, about the thing that killed him. It's the fact that these songs were released after he lost his life to drug use that makes them really hard to hear. And I really struggle to find enjoyment in any of the music, even if some of it sounds alright. That's why I can't rate this. Pop Smoke's album being in the D tier is different because to me that one stood out more clearly as bad and as something that was just forced out by the label. But this Juice one is just really weird to me. Like, for example, Juice, as we've all heard, has about 2,000 songs in the vault. And even with that being the case, somehow something like Feline, which is so poorly mixed and sounds like a low quality leak, found its way onto the album. To put it simply, there's just a lot of weird choices that make this a really strange and uncomfortable listen. Kind of a down note to end on, but that is every rap album that I listened to in 2021 on a tier list. I didn't get to listen to absolutely every album that I wanted to listen to this year, but I know myself and I don't know how long it's going to take for me to actually get around to them, and I want to get this one out in a timely manner. So to close it out, let's do what I did in the hit songs video and go through my top 10 best and top 10 worst albums of 2021. Top 10 best, from the bottom to the top, we've got JPEG Mafia with LP, Brockhampton with Roadrunner, New Light, New Machine, Dave, We're All Alone in This Together, Tyler the Creator, Call Me If You Get Lost, J. Cole, The Off Season, Slowthai with TYRON, Genesis Owusu, Smiling with No Teeth, Quadeca, From Me to You, Little Sims, Sometimes I Might Be Introvert, and my number one album of 2021, I'm sure you guys already know, Kanye West, Donda. And the top 10 worst, from the bottom to top: Migos with Culture 3, Logic with Bobby Tarantino 3, Ski Mask the Slump God with Sin City the Mixtape, Young Stoner Life, Young Thug and Gunna with Slime Language 2, Drake, Certified Lover Boy, Pop Smoke, or more accurately Pop Smoke's label, with Faith, Lil Yachty, Michigan Boy Bolt, Young Nudy, Dr. Evil, Lil Wayne and Rich the Kid, Trust Fund Babies, and my personal worst album of 2021. We have YBN Nahmir with VISIONLAND. And so, that is it for this very long video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thank you for joining me for these different styles of end of year videos that I've done this year. And here's hoping that 2022 holds good things for all of us. I hope you guys had a great Christmas. I don't know if I had a great Christmas yet because I'm recording this at 3 AM on Christmas Day. With that being said, you can click here to watch my end of year video on every hit rap song of the year. And of course, much love to all of my Patreon supporters on the screen right now, with a special shout out to my biggest supporters on there: Big Daddy Foe, David, I Am Region, iRunner, and Psycho Sam Productions.